Basically, that was what I was telling you about, the vault in Norway that the country of Norway is paying for. And it has all the seeds from all the plants around the world. Like I said, it gives me hope, but not always. Okay, so let's talk about the water cycle. Water cycle, very important to know about and respect. Because water is going to do what water is going to do. My spouse is a Chinese medicine acupuncturist. She studied in that area. And one of the exercises that they have them do to talk about the power of water is that they have them hold water in their hands. And at first, you can hold water in your hands, and it'll stay there. But eventually, it works its way down, and eventually, it's going to drip. Water is a hugely powerful force. If we don't know that after Hurricane Sandy, for gosh sakes, when finally white people got hit with a storm, I'm just saying, after Katrina, I didn't see a lot of behavior changing because it was a lot of people that were not affected. But, you know, I'd like to hope that after Hurricane Sandy, now we're really talking about it. This stuff is real. It is slamming. Water is this huge force that we need to respect. So what happens when it goes awry? Well, we know Katrina, 2005. Some of those areas have been rebuilt. Some of the levees have been rebuilt. But we're still living in places where humans should not live. And it's all our own doing. You know, we created this mess. People living below sea level, right next to the sea? Not a good idea. Yeah, so we got to think about where people live. Drought is such a huge problem that only used to affect countries with deserts and, you know, that kind of arid climate. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. Sorry, this is from 2014. I didn't have time to track down the current one, but the current one doesn't look that different, right? Do you know anybody who lives in California, especially Southern California? You know anybody who lives there? They're on water restrictions 100% of the time. My sister-in-law and her husband came to visit us, and you know, he gets out of the shower and he's like, "Whoa, that feels so good to just take a shower and not have to, you know, have the 2-minute timer on, or do they call it a San Francisco shower. You know what that is? You turn on the water, you get wet, you turn off the water, you get soaked up, do what you need to do, turn the water back on, rinse yourself off, and that's it. That's San Francisco shower. You know, that might use 4 or 5 gallons of water total. Oh, and you got to put a bucket in the shower with you, because you got to catch as much of the water as you can. Yeah, I know. I got in the shower when we visited there, and I was like, "Is there a bucket in the shower?" Yeah. So you got to be aware of these things. You know, to me, water is going to be the oil of the future, right? A lot of people have said that. I'm not alone. We're going to be fighting over these things. If desalinization becomes affordable, think about how that changes what's going on over here. You know, oh, we'll just take the water, the excess water from the glaciers melting, and we'll take the salt out of it, and we'll use it for, yeah, the size of the changes. Oh, that and you know, bugs like the gypsy moth are not a bad thing, and kudzu's just fine because it's great for erosion control. That's an invasive plant. It's really bad plant. We fool ourselves into thinking that things are good things. And I'm sure you've seen all kinds of scenes like this. You know, we think this is extreme. This must be Costa Rica or something, and you know, this must be, oh, out west in the canyon somewhere. Well, not this one, but these two are from construction sites. Right around here. Here's their new air conditioners, heat pumps, and here's all this runoff going right into the woods. Because we don't respect the soil, we don't take care of it. You know, we're not respecting the water cycle. And we've all seen these kinds of situations, from, a 6-foot cut to that's about a 20-foot cut. And especially in the coastal plain where, basically from I-95 east, all of that is highly erosive. And we need to, even the Piedmont has erosive characteristics too, up Montgomery County, that kind of thing, but it's more rocky based. So, we have huge erosion problems. I love this one. He's standing right there, look at the waterfall, it's so pretty. There's one of these on a site where a super Walmart is trying to be built in Prince George's County. And we said, you know what, you need to do something about this before you build that super Walmart. So let's talk about how water is or is not available to plants, kind of what it does as it moves around on sites. This is a fairly common illustration to talk about impervious surfaces. So let's define some terms here for a minute. An impervious surface is anything that the rain will fall down and it will run off. Okay, so that's concrete, asphalt, roofs, cars, anything that the rain is going to come down and wash off. In some cases, grass and turf areas can get so compacted that nothing is infiltrating down into the ground. Can anybody think of a very famous example not far from here, maybe 15 miles from here, that needed massive restoration because of all of the traffic?
National Capital Mall.
Yeah, the National Mall. And 90% of that was just foot traffic. This isn't, bulldozers and stuff running over the soil. This was on the National Mall where, coming off the Capitol there. And it's just going to get worse over time. So they finally started doing some restoration and closing off areas. And there's some beautiful American elms there still that are just gorgeous to have picnics under. But they won't be there for long if they just keep compacting the soil. So impervious surfaces, when there's about 10 to 20%, that's a typical subdivision, might be 10 to 20% impervious surface. You're going to get some deep infiltration, some shallow infiltration, about 20% will run off, and you'll have some that will transpire either through plants or it will just evaporate, okay? That's a typical kind of situation. But this is a little harder to see, but so here's pre-development. So what happens with that rain when it comes down? The trees intercept it. You ever seen a sidewalk when it's just a drizzly rain just starting, and how much the tree canopy captures that? I could go hiking in the woods where we are when it's pouring rain, because none of it gets down, through that. There's lots of interception. Some of it transpires. There's some surface runoff. There's some interflow and some base flow. Interflow being just under the surface there. And then you have post-development where, I love how they did this. The surface runoff is a huge arrow. Now we got all this surface runoff. We have some transpiration from the one tree that's left. And, the interflow, this, near the surface water flow has decreased significantly because that water is running off. It's not getting down into the soil like the pre-development conditions had. So just look at the size of the arrows from the diagram on the left to the right. So this interflow is not much. Base flow also gets reduced. So all the organisms and everybody who lives in that soil and is used to a certain level of moisture and infiltration goes, I can't live in this, it's too dry. And all the biology, it's a crumbling building once that happens because they're not there to support each other, all those microorganisms. So yeah, so then you have all this surface runoff. So how can we provide for adequate drainage for the structures and the things that we want to have, for us, but also mimic the mimic this pre-development condition. That's the goal. Is try to get it as close to this as possible.
Can you explain the difference between evapotranspiration and transpiration?
I was afraid you were going to ask that.
That's all right, there's Google.
Well, as I understand it, evapotranspiration is both what evaporates and what trees transpire. In photosynthesis, trees give off water. So that's part of what they transpire. So transpiration is all that's left. It's the evaporation that goes away in that scenario, as I understand it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so how do we get adequate drainage for the buildings, but also try to mimic this pre-development condition? When you hear people talk about stormwater management, they say you have to mimic either the pre-development condition in some regulations, I think that's where Virginia still is, or in Maryland, you have to mimic a forest in good condition. So what does a forest in good condition do? It infiltrates that water, it provides some evapotranspiration, it keeps most of the water on site, and it gets it down into the ground. So that's the standard that designers have to meet. If this was a site that got this much rainfall before, I've got to manage this much rainfall to keep it on the site, get it infiltration, and it's called to the maximum extent practicable. MEP, maximum extent practicable. So you just do the best you can. And that's a very difficult thing, because then the reviewers are always pushing the engineers to do better, and the engineers, frankly, are trying to help their client do the least amount of work that's needed. So that's something that you're going to get into when you start doing some stormwater calculations and looking at that stuff is, first of all, what's the standard that you have to meet? Is it pre-development conditions, or is it a forest in good condition? What's that you have to meet? And then how would you meet it? Surface water, I've had some fun with this over the years. So my original claim to fame, not finding in my stack of stuff. Let me just grab a copy of this real quick. Way back in 2005, Prince George's County wanted to do a green infrastructure plan, which a green infrastructure plan, okay, well, let me just define a term real quick. Green infrastructure can mean either, both and, bioretention, things that we build on a site to retain stormwater, because they call that, I call it green stormwater infrastructure. Because to me, the real definition of green infrastructure is ecological places that are connected through a network, okay? So what we did was we mapped what we had given our skills at the time, and I'm showing a map now that is just, you can get a good idea. The dark green are regulated areas, floodplains, those kind of things that would be protected anyway. And the light green is how we would propose to connect them, okay? So this is a functional master plan. It's the same as a land use plan. Isn't that cool? A plan for the environment that says this is how we want to grow with regard to the environment. First one in the country. Lots of counties and places around have followed suit, but this is a land use document with teeth. So what did we say? We said, with regard to water quality, we said, doggone it. Now I'm showing the maps of water quality. There's two of them because one measures actual water quality and one measures habitat. And they measure different things. What does that red tell you? Just what's your reaction? It's bad, it's a problem. Yes. That was a communications thing. Our publication people, when they did these maps the first time, this is very poor is the category. Very poor water quality. They came back with one that was kind of light pink for that, and I said, no, I want the reddest red that you've got in your palette, because we need to show that this is a problem. This scale for measuring water quality has 2 more levels that aren't on here. Good and very good. We didn't even bother to put them on here because we didn't have it. So what contributed to this water quality? Okay, so this county, you see this right here, that's Washington, D.C., just so you see where we are. So we're just east of Washington, D.C. So why do you think these counties close to Washington counties, these watersheds, these are all watersheds, yay, we're doing stuff at the watershed scale, we're using them as a measurement, yay! Why would those watersheds have such poor water quality? What could be the contributing factors?
Population and development.
Population and development,
Impervious surface.
impervious surface,
Factory.
factories, there's some development there. They're mostly bedroom communities, but there's certainly shopping centers and stuff. The Capital Beltway goes right, interestingly enough, you know, the inner Beltway communities were mostly built what's left between the 1920s and the 1970s. A lot of them in the 40s and 50s after World War II. This area got built up huge. Arlington too. Both sides of the Potomac, after World War II, all these people came back and they were like, yeah, let's have babies and baby boomers and all that. So lots and lots of home building happened during that era. Were there stormwater management requirements in the 50s, 60s? Does anybody know when the first like stormwater regulations started coming in? What decade?
70s?
80s. 80s. Clean Water Act was what year? 1972. I believe Clean Air was 1970 and Clean Water was 1972. So from 1972 until our first one was 81, 82. 10 years after federal legislation to protect water. That's how long it took to get an ordinance. And we were fairly early in the game in our county. So that's what we're talking about. These communities have no stormwater management at all. The water goes right into the streams, nothing. Okay? And it's harder to retrofit because everywhere's been built. There's no place to, hey, we want to come in and do this bioretention thing here to capture this water. But it's good because attention is being paid to it. These 2 maps, all we really had to do to get this plan passed was I walked around with these 2 maps. Do you think the elected officials really made the connection between water quality and, you know, that this is environment? No, it just made us look bad. And they didn't want to look bad. They're politicians, right? So, you know, I kind of walked around with these maps and I'm like, hey, everybody, you know, kind of got a problem here. Pushing the policy that we need to do things. You know what this ended up with? Wider minimum stream buffers in the regulations. So this is where a scientific study led to policies and strategies. And one of the strategies in here is says explore wider stream buffers to protect water quality. Because, you know, water quality is not good, so we need to do something about it. Just a guide. This is a guidance document. But what it does is it says, go change the regulations to do wider stream buffers. So when we're doing our budget, I pulled this open and I said, look, we got all this work to do. We got to change these ordinances. We got to do this stuff, so I need money in the budget for us to do that. It took 5 years to rewrite the code. But you know what we did? We pulled all of the development community in. We did it in a sustainable way. We said, we want engineers, we want landscape architects, we want surveyors, we want everybody in the room, and we're going to roll up our sleeves. 2 whole meetings dedicated to the definition of a stream, intermittent and perennial. 2 whole meetings to argue about what's a regulated stream. Okay? By the time we got it to the elected officials, we were all good to go. Holding hands, singing Kumbaya. And nobody questioned the legislation, because the last people that you want writing legislation are legislators. You want the staff to be writing it and moving it forward. So does that make sense? One of the things I want to really emphasize is how you get from, using this as a case study kind of, how you get from a policy, hey, it's a good idea, water quality is important, down to, so now the minimum stream buffers had been 50 feet on each side of the stream. That's the state standard, minimum 50 feet, that's it. You don't get any more than that. There was some slope stuff, but I won't go into that. So now the minimum was inside the beltway, 60 feet, because we were recognizing there's development there already. Many of these streams are compromised. We're not trying to go for 200-foot stream buffers, like Montgomery County has some very wide stream buffers in their regulations. We said, no, inside the beltway we'll take 60 feet. That's a 10-foot increase, that's good. Between the beltway and the rural area, we said, okay, 75 feet. That's a developing place, that's where we can preserve a little bit more. And then outside, 100 feet on each side, because that's the rural area, that's where you're most flexible in design, that's where you can do other things, okay? So it went from, boy, our water quality was bad, is bad, still it takes decades to fix that, to we're gonna make some positive changes to what gets preserved. Also, we went from just some minor slopes that would be included to all slopes that were 15% or greater that are adjacent to that buffer or the stream get included in the buffer. That was huge. Because remember we said coastal plain, wide, flat floodplains. So you need to add those slopes that are, usually it's a floodplain and then a slope, and then you put the buffer at the top. We weren't doing that, and we should have been all along. So now we got the regulations to fit the landscape, if that makes sense. So, you know.
Could you explain for a second why the buffer goes at the top?
Why it's important, why it's good?
Why it's important.
Yeah, because, so if you have they're that steep, so your houses are up here on each side, okay? You see this? And here's the slope, you know, and there's trees. And this is the floodplain, okay? This is going to flood. Here's the stream and its little channel. If you stop the buffer here, you've missed one of the most important elements of protecting that stream, is this steep slope right here. Because the trees, if you then allow the grading to go right to that point, that floodplain is compromised. So taking it to the top of the slope here means all these trees on that slope get preserved, and they stabilize the slope and keep it in place. That's critically important. And you might be seeing those on some of the sites that you go out to. You know, this is ideal. It doesn't always happen that way, and especially if something was built before, 2000, in some cases, not so good. Okay, let's keep moving on here. Was this case study helpful to talk about how policy gets into regulations? I want you to understand that, especially the urban planning students.
That's a great book. Is there somewhere we can get a copy of that?
This is online.
Online?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll find the link for you. Yeah, definitely. It's actually been, it's in the process of being replaced by the plan that's in here. Oh, so you saw what that map looked like? It was, oh shoot, I don't remember what the percentages were, but you can tell from looking at this map. Is there more on that map that's part of the plan now, or less?
Yeah.
About double.
Is that the right colors now?
Say again?
Are those the correct colors still?
Oh yeah, the dark green are the regulated areas and the light green are the evaluation areas. But what we said through our process was that we need to evaluate more of our resources. As they get diminished, the ones that are left have more value. Does that make sense? We're in a developing community. We're where Fairfax County was about 20 years ago. And we don't want to end up where Fairfax County is. Failing streams, you know, just all kinds of problems because they didn't respect the environment. They didn't have the laws in place. I know, I worked here for 14 years. They didn't protect stream buffers. There aren't regulations in place to do those kind of things. So, you know, so we said whatever's left really has more value, especially because we're under a state mandate in Maryland to meet stormwater pollution regulations, and I'm getting ahead of myself, so that's a good place for me to pause. But we have to meet state standards. And this is one of the ways that we tell the state we're going to do it, is that we focus on what areas we want to see preserved. And can you see how this goes hand in hand with, well, we'll call this a plan. So you have your land use plan for New Carrollton, whatever it is, for a metro station, whatever it is. And you link it with this environmental plan. So there's stuff in here about noise and other things. And you put those two together, and it's putting human needs and the needs of the environment on the same plane. It's for the first time putting environmental needs and the needs of the environment, and physical construction on it's leveling the playing field, to use a bad analogy, because that would involve clearing trees to level the playing field. But you know what I mean? For the first time, a quick example, and I'll get back on track here. We once had a subdivision that, and you know, in maturing counties, you always ask yourself, why hasn't this piece of property been built on before? If somebody's coming in for a subdivision, especially inside the Beltway, you're going, it's got a problem. There's something there. So you look at it, and it's floodplain, and you know they're trying to squeeze some houses in there, and it's an awkward piece of property. And the only way in that doesn't result in impacts to the stream is on a major road. And the transportation planner comes into the meeting and goes, can't have that access onto the major road. Can't do it. It's against our policies. So he's a rather large man, and you know I'm sitting next to him, and we always, you know, planning department is a bunch of jokesters. And I said, well, if they put the access down at the other point, it sends them through an existing residential neighborhood, and it impacts a wetland and the floodplain. Huge, would have been 5 acres of impact, something really big. The developer was sitting there going, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to get that permit. So as it turned out, the developer and the environmental planner were on the same page going, you can't make them go through there. So I turned to the transportation planner and I said, I'll wrestle you for it. Laughter, laughter, laughter. And he finally said, oh, okay, well, we'll do, he came up with transportation solutions. So we didn't have to impact that wetland. And for the first time, the environment and other plans like transportation were equal. We got to have a say, and the transportation planner got to have a say. And we worked out a solution that met both sides' needs. That's what we got to be doing. And what most counties don't have is an environmental plan that they can point to and say, this gives the guidance for what we should do. And that's where I really get to preaching when I preach the gospel of green infrastructure planning. And it is Sunday, after all. We should have a preaching up in here. Okay, so, oh, that's right, we're going to go through a little evolution. So how does surface water quality affect you? Would you do that?
What is she doing? I can't see.
Drinking water out of a stream.
Oh,
No.
Would you do it out in West Virginia? Would you do it anywhere?
no.
No? That's sad, isn't it? I used to do it all the time. Yeah. Really not a good situation. I'm going to skip through these. We know about that. Whoa. One of the biggest problems for water quality is trash. This is on the Anacostia River. It's a trash catchment that a lot of partners went together. Park and Planning got stuck doing the maintenance because it's on our property and, we have to maintain it. They say about 90% of the trash that they get is recyclable. That's a shame. I'll tell you what, have a 5-cent deposit on stuff, you almost never see trash on the side of the road where there's bottle bills. Such a good thing. And getting rid of trash bag, or plastic bags. I can't, those thin grocery ones just drive me crazy. I have a picture of a stream that the bottom of the stream is all plastic bags that have just gotten caught in the roots and stuff going by. Terrible. So do you know where your water comes from? Are you on a well?
Yeah.
Do you know who's in your aquifer recharge area? Is it all farming pretty much and woods? Yeah, you're lucky. Where my well was when I lived in Prince George's, the aquifer recharge area, Laurel. Yeah, pretty much built. So we had 2 filters on the water in our house. Where's your water come from?
The river?
A rich river.
The Potomac?
Potomac River, right? Where do you live?
Arlington?
Okay, yeah. Do you know who owns the Potomac River?
I don't.
Or who has jurisdiction over it? Maryland! How smart was Maryland way back when? They said, oh, let's put the, not down the middle, let's put the state line over on your shoreline. And at the time, Virginia was like, well, you guys have to take care of the river, that's all right. Remember I said I wanted to do a master's thesis on how these 2 states got along? Well, how smart was it Maryland? Fairfax County the water authority wanted to come in and put another pipe in the Potomac River 2 decades ago probably. And Maryland said, I don't think so. And the negotiations began, and even 15, 20 years later, I'm not sure they've figured out a solution. Because Maryland owns the water, but the intake for the county is up there. Anybody else? Do you know where water comes from?
The reservoir.
DC water?
Del Carly, is that reservoir?
Where are you?
McLean?
McLean, I think you're still coming from the Potomac. What reservoir are you talking about?
I thought we were on a reservoir. Del Carlia or
Oh.
the-
Well, you're on
DC side.
Fairfax Water Authority
Yeah.
water, right?